Hi, everybody. It's Karen Anderson here with aortichope, and we have a pretty fun live event tonight. It is Marfan Awareness Month in the month of February, and we have our very own board member, survivor, and he has Marfan syndrome, so it's perfect. And this is Bill Barnhart. Hey, Bill.
Good evening. I'd like to clarify that the fun part is having Bill here, not the Marfan syndrome.
No, that's better order. That's a much better order. So yeah, we didn't even really talk about how this was going to go, but for everybody that's watching or joins us in the middle of this, excuse me, like and click on the follow and hit the bell so that you're notified of when all of our live events happen. And please leave us a comment or hit us with a question. We'd be, happy to answer them during this event. And of course, we'll answer them after the event if you're seeing it on rebroadcast or replay or whatever the technical terminology is. But so let's think about how we're going to do this, because this is different. I don't never had a chance to actually interview you. That was always Greg's job. So let's kind of bring everybody, I guess, a little bit up to speed and get into some serious information, which would be the why, where, how all of the information, the backstory about Marfan syndrome. Like, how did you find out? When did you find out? How old were you? Give us everything.
So I'll switch back. I'll go back even a little bit further. Anyone who's not familiar with Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome is probably the best known of the connective tissue disorders, the genetic disorders that affect the connective tissue. Many of us are familiar with because of aortic issues that could come from a number of reasons. Mine happen to be Marfan related. The best way I've ever heard it described, a doctor described as most people's connective tissue that holds them all together, holds their whole body together, is made of Gorilla Glue.
Gorilla Glue?
Gorilla Glue.
Okay.
And if you have Marfan syndrome or another connective tissue disorder, it's Elmer's glue.
Okay.
It doesn't have quite as much of a hold. So it can affect a number of the body systems. A couple of the more consistent are the eyes. So I have subluxated lens, or had subluxated lenses. I'll explain that a little bit more as we go along. And the obviously critical part is the aorta. Every time your heart beats, as we all know, the aorta beats as well. And each time it gets a little bit bigger because it doesn't have the connective tissue holding it together. And at one point it'll either dissect or rupture or aneurysm. You end up with aortic valve problems, because along the same lines, the valve can increase in size and you end up with murmurs and replacement. I apologize for the little dog walking around making all sorts of noise.
Let me ask you a quick question. Well, we can't see the dog, just so you know, because of your background, but I did hear a little feet go. Yep. So if what you're saying is, because I really didn't know much about this syndrome, I don't know really much about any of the well-known syndromes. So as your heart beats and as our hearts beat, because you just described it, Gorilla Glue versus Elmer's glue. So what you're saying is, because you don't have the same connective tissue, the tightness, it can cause an aneurysm. This can be anywhere, right? So it could be in any of your vessels.
Correct. Yep. It can be anywhere. The most common that people notice are the aorta, because it's the largest. But yes, it can be anywhere within the body systems. So I am very lucky. I have a mild case of Marfan's. Many people are categorized by very tall, very skinny, with very long fingers and toes and extremities. There's a couple quote unquote tests for Marfan syndrome. If your wingspan is longer than you are tall, it's a good sign, because you do have the longer extremities. Mm-hmm. There's the popular thumb test, where if you can lay your thumb and it sticks past your hand and you can, so it sticks out. And I'm not nearly as flexible as I used to be.
Yeah, no, I can't. Everybody at home is now going, oh, let me see if I can do that.
Yep. It's funny. I have a daughter who is Marfan's, and she'll sit with her feet backwards.
Wow.
Just perfectly comfortable. She'll turn her feet around, and as you go to conferences and medical shows, you see people do this all the time and don't even think about it. It's they're stupid human tricks, we call them, or the Marf tricks. So my case was, because I am fairly mild. Like I said, people always laugh when I say that because I have an extensive medical history from related to my Marfan syndrome. I've had multiple aneurysms, 2 dissections. Yeah, that's right, kids. Not one, count them 2 dissections.
One after we spoke on the phone.
Yeah, they were actually this. Every time I tell a doctor this, they shake their head and just ask me, what am I doing here and how am I still here? They were 17 years apart to the day.
Wow.
I was actually wearing one of my aortichope shirts at the time, had just left a CAT scan with a clean bill of health, and the CAT scan has been reviewed by other surgeons to say, did someone screw up? Did someone miss something? And it's been a resounding no. That's part of the danger of aortic health and part of the danger we live with Marfan syndrome and other connective tissue disorders.
Do you think that there was a connection at all between having the dye put in, which does cause a reaction, does cause your heart to increase the heart rate and everything? Do you think that, have they said at all that maybe that could have just set something off?
Nothing.
It's just a fluke. It just happened.
Yeah, there was both days, but Monday morning quarterbacking, looking back, both days there were stressors of things that had been increasing my stress, increasing my anxiety, and I think that was a bigger contributor. The first one, we know one of the contributors, and a little shout out to Greg on this because him and I were very close about this. Those energy drinks. Stay away from those damn things. I was drinking a lot of those at the time. And at the time they didn't know. They were fairly new. And everyone thought, oh, these are filled with ginseng and turing and a bunch of other things that sound really healthy. So they gotta be good for you.
Right.
I should have just stuck to drinking coffee. Or getting sleep and taking care of myself.
True. Any of those, correct.
Right. But I was fairly young. I was still in my 20s when I had my first dissection. So you're unstoppable.
Did you know you had Marfan's in your 20s?
So I did. I was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome. Just a biographical story, so no offense by any of the terms used, but I was 3 years old. My family lived in Minnesota. Took me to the University of Minnesota Medical Clinic because they felt something wasn't right. And my parents insisted that something was wrong. They couldn't put their finger on, but something was wrong. And the doctor said, no, that kid's perfectly fine. He's just retarded.
Jeez.
Again, this is the mid-70s. This is much more acceptable.
Right.
But my parents didn't believe that. And kind of kept it in the back of their mind. Moved to DC, and someone said, well, I'm in the Northern Virginia area. Someone said, why don't you take him to this doctor, this eye doctor? And they took me to a gentleman who's known as the father of pediatric ophthalmology. I'm very blessed to live in the area I live in that has such a great medical system. This guy, Marshall Parks, is world famous, an amazing doctor. And said, hey, I have a friend over at Hopkins who you should go talk to as well. This kid, smart as a whip, he just can't see. And my lenses were, because the muscles that connect your lenses and the tissue had weakened, the lenses slide out of place, and I couldn't see right.
Mm-hmm.
He knew this as a sign of Marfan syndrome, so he sent me to Victor McCusick, who essentially wrote the book on Marfan syndrome out of Johns Hopkins. He had gone on to run the Genome Project and a number of other gene-related issues. Just, again, an amazing doctor in the right place at the right time. He's got Marfan syndrome. Let's start checking out his heart and watching him. And I've been on beta blockers since, I think I was 6 or 7.
Does anybody in your family have Marfan?
I'm the original mutant.
And so that can happen. So that can.
It's a gene mutation.
Mutation X. You are it.
Yep.
Okay. Original.
My children like to remind me that I'm a mutant.
Right.
They like to remind me that I'm a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the times that I've died during open heart surgery. And a couple years ago, because of in large part because of the history of Marfan syndrome and heart-related issues, I'm also extra susceptible to endocarditis.
Okay.
Which I've had a number of times. The most recent, they took out a bunch of blood, nuclearized it so they could inject it back into me and try to track the white blood cells. And the kids like to remind me that now I'm a nuclear.
You're radioactive.
Yeah, I'm a radioactive mutant zombie. Right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. They handle it very well.
They mean it with love.
Of course.
But yeah, so that was how they discovered I had Marfan syndrome. And for me, it's always been just a part of my life. It's nothing that I've really focused much on. I try to raise awareness about it, but for me, it's part of everyday life. It's, I've for the most part, I stayed fairly healthy until I ended up having my dissection. Well, I had endocarditis in the mid-90s, and that was a big wake-up call because I spent 6 weeks in the hospital dealing with that medically or medicinally instead of having a valve replacement. But when you're 18 and they say, well, no, you're an adult, you have to sign to have your chest cracked open and have a valve replaced, it really wakes you up. Years later, I was at work and it felt like someone hit me in the back with a sledgehammer. And I didn't really think anything of it. I thought it was stress. I went and I laid down in the back. I worked in retail, had been in a heated discussion with someone, which was part of the stress. I went and laid down in the back and was fine until an ambulance came. I called them and said, something's wrong. No, there's not. You're fine. You don't even need to go to the hospital.
Did you tell them you had Marfan? Or did you even register? Okay, so you did know enough to say.
It didn't even click for them, which is why aortichope, Think Aorta, the Marfan Foundation, and other groups are so important, because now when I tell people, medical professionals, that I have Marfan syndrome, their eyes light up and they get all excited. They're like, really?
See, but just think about that. Look how far it's come over, without divulging in people.
Fantastic.
30 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. The movie came out a couple of years ago that I can't recall the name of, but it was an Owen Wilson movie, and there was a comment in there about Marfan syndrome, the giant killer. And the community was very divided. Many people took it as a slight. How can you make fun of this? It does kill people. Many other people, including me, said, any press is good press. They made this comment. It wasn't done as a glowing reception of how wonderful this is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it raised awareness. And if we can't poke fun at the things in our life, we got a problem.
Right.
And that's just my opinion of make the best of the situation. If making the best of the situation means making fun of it so that more people know about it and can be educated. Right.
So as a teen, because it's been really hard for me, I'm part of the 90% that don't know what their genetic mutation is. It hasn't been discovered yet. But what we're realizing and what we will probably determine in the next 10, 15, 20 years is it's all genetic unless you had a car accident or you were doing drugs.
Yep.
So for me, having at the time, 15, 16-year-old son and trying to explain to him that this is possibly or probably genetic, you really can't lift 175, 200 pounds and try to be the power lifter was really a struggle. So what was that like for you, in your teens, just trying to be an active kid? What kind of restrictions?
For me, it was, and this goes back to just part of life. My view of life, I've been told, is very different from most people. I grew up unrelated to the Marfan syndrome, but my mother was a quadriplegic with multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
And had been bedridden for the last 20 years of her life. I never saw her walk without, for a very short period, a cane or a walker. And then for most of my upbringing was either in a wheelchair or bedridden. And didn't let it slow her down. And that really, it didn't let it slow her down mentally. And didn't let it push her down of conversations and working with people and having her beliefs and her standards. And that kind of set a tone for me of I might not be able to do everything I want to do, but I can do a lot more than some people.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a great mindset. Yeah.
A lot of it I just didn't let bother me. There were things that I just knew I couldn't get into. I couldn't get into horseback riding. I can go out trail riding when you go camping and things like that. But I'm not even really supposed to do that because the movement with the connective tissue is so weak that I've had a retina detach standing in the kitchen.
It's amazing.
I was talking with some people and
boom.
It was, what happened? I think my retina just detached. What do you mean? Well, my left eye just went black.
That's amazing.
What? Like, yeah.
Well, so definitely riding a horse.
No.
Riding a horse wouldn't work. Riding a motorcycle, I would think, would be scary.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many things that, yeah. It's just, but you've been living with this, so to you, it's just what's normal.
Yeah, it's just every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the weirder ones. Though, just it was like a curtain on the side.
Yeah.
It's like, where did that person that was standing over there? And the funny part is I've worn my when we were growing up, you'd call them Coke bottle glasses, but kids don't make bottles out of Coke bottles anymore. And now the joke that came up, oh God, probably 25 years ago at work and is still stuck around is, yeah, those things are so strong you can see into the future.
That's a good one. I like that.
Oh, I'm so used to having blind sides.
Yeah.
Because between the frame and the lack of lens, anything out here is invisible to me. So my child, who is Marfan, also wears glasses, and I've just explained to her, you can't tell everybody this, but this group I'm going to share it with,
okay,
we're Jedis.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is, because you start to pick up little things. You'll notice someone coming up behind you without being able to see them. You'll pick up on things that are going on. Jedi.
So it's true. As one sense might lessen, your other senses become more enhanced.
Exactly.
So nobody can sneak up on Bill.
Or that's part of where the kids call me a mutant. Maybe that's it, but I like to go Jedi.
Could be. So it's kind of like you have eyes behind your head, really. Exactly. All right. So tell me a little bit. there's been a lot of confusion, I think, because you hear about Louie, Deets and vascular Ehlers-Danlos, and then I see both names underneath of Marfan. How did that end up happening? Has that always been? And what does that mean? And do you know enough about or anything about the other two that seem to
I
fall underneath this umbrella?
I know a little bit about them. One thing I work fairly closely with the Marfan Foundation. It's a wonderful group
Hmm.
um, that has really been extremely supportive of myself, my family, and the aortic community. Uh, it's been without any of the back end, but simply my opinion of what I've watched go on was they've science and medicine has come a long way, and they've been able to identify more variations, and they've been able to identify these different genetic mutations that do different things, because there's Ehlers-Danlos and then there's vascular Ehlers-Danlos, where vascular runs into a lot of the obviously vascular issues of the aorta and the other blood vessels. They realized a couple years ago, it seems, that instead of separating all these groups and saying, here, you focus on Ehlers-Danlos, you focus on Marfan, you focus on that, there's more strength in working together. Instead of trying to split up the pie of, I mean, let's be honest, research dollars,
Hmm.
research knowledge, patient support, all these different things that you can do together for people who are experiencing fairly similar experiences. You can bring those together, help, as I mentioned earlier, educate one another on the differences and learn more. Because the more we go try to separate people, the harder it is to come to some of these understandings, and the harder it is to come to wisdom.
Hmm. Very
Yeah,
true.
you can look at this and say, ah, you do the stupid human tricks that us Marfs will do, and you get the kids even because they're at the conferences. You have a whole Marfan teen and kids groups that they get all excited about doing their little tricks, and
Hmm.
it's great. The other kids are seeing this and they're getting interested in it.
Yeah.
So it's the foundation is pulled more under a single umbrella of connective tissue disorders, so that the shared resources really are shared and help us all advance and learn more.
Hmm.
Uh, I haven't done a fantastic job of learning the differences between each of them. I do know that I'm, again, extremely blessed. My doctor is Deets, Hal Deets,
Hmm.
who sort of Lois Deets him and Lois discovered this, and they
Right.
work on it, and they're discovering new things every day. It's
Right.
it's really
I kind
interesting.
of I've kind of looked at it. It seems like at least that Marfan is the umbrella,
Yeah,
and through a variety of mutations, they've realized that there are connections back to Marfan with Lowy Dietz and with Ehlers-Danlos or vascular Ehlers-Danlos, and probably I'm not sure about active 2, but there's a bunch of other syndromes, and I'm feeling like they all are in some point heading in the direction of they've mutated off of this. Don't know that, but I know at least the other two
no,
do.
my belief is the same thing. The
Yep.
way that I've described it to people for a couple of years, I have been uh, a very active participant in pushing this idea of one ship,
Hmm.
of and right from the very start of at the conferences, with there being a little bit more like, hey, let's break off this group, but let's break up. I was very vocal of no, we want to, let's try to pull everybody together. And the foundation, I think, was already aiming in that direction. I was working at it because they saw the benefit of it. But it's the best analogy I can make is cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You have cancer research, and then you have your different types of cancer research. Well, Marfan's is at this point the overarching connective tissue disorder that can pull everyone together in this group. And then the other ones can kind of split off a little bit, but it all comes back to this idea of here is one big identifiable connective tissue disorder.
Right. And what it seems like is everybody and what is it? It's marfan.org, correct?
Yep.
I believe that's the website. So if you have a known connective tissue disorder, it would make sense for you to go to marfan.org and check out what they have to offer. So everyone in that realm would fit in the aortichope or rock from the heart realm, but not necessarily everybody here would fit there, which is, I like the idea of what you said of creating oneness, which I think is what we're really organizing to do beginning this year, is have more of a collaboration. And it's not to say that we are exclusive of people with a known disorder. If anything, it's the opposite. We're kind of the catcher's mitt of everything.
It's creating a community. When you
Exactly.
have a community, you don't live in the same house as your neighbor.
Right.
But you have a shared experience with them.
Yes.
Your shared experience within your subdivision is a little bit different than the one in the subdivision next year's, but it's close enough that you can relate to them and you can work with them and talk with them. And it's the same thing. It's, yeah. In what ways can we pull people together as opposed to finding ways to divide them?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, you had mentioned that your daughter has Marfan, and we all know that she's done a lot of work in the Marfan community. Do you want to talk a little bit about those efforts?
She has. She is a wonderful kid. I'm very lucky. She had, many years ago, she made the decision. She told her mother and I, she said, I want to do more within the Marfan group. We're like, okay. I think she was 17 now. It was probably 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And started getting ideas. And she goes, well, I want to put together, I had actually gone into the hospital for, I can't remember if it was aortic replacement or when they cut my heart open.
I don't know. It sounds like cut my heart open, aortic replacement. Yeah, not big difference. It was a big surgery, nonetheless.
Yeah, I'd been in the hospital for a while, and she realized, it gets boring in there.
Right.
Well, once you wake up, you're bored.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, I want to do something for kids in the hospital, because it's not fair that kids go into the hospital and they don't have anything to do. And she decided to start putting together backpacks for kids and talking about it. And she had all these great ideas, but she was a kid. Kids get all these wonderful ideas. You want it, you support them. You want to support them. You want to say, let's go for it. This was not the first of those ideas. And it came at a time where I wouldn't say we were frustrated with it, but it was more so one of those, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
You do a SWAT and we'll help you with it. But we're not just going to jump on this and do it. She goes, what's a SWAT? Her mother said, figure it out. And we gave her a little bit of background of, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What's your business plan?
Mm-hmm.
Damn it, she did it. She came to us a couple months later and said, here's my business plan, and had it laid out. Had thought about what she wanted to do.
Okay.
So at this point, you got to support the kid. and she didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
She had passion behind it. And she started talking to another young lady in the Marfan community. And they kind of started, it was funny because the young lady she met in the Marfan community was online. And my initial thought with a preteen daughter was, this is some creepy 50-year-old dude. And kind of funny, her parents thought the same thing, and now the two of them are very close friends and have been for years. Um, but they have a shared experience from half a country away.
Mm-hmm.
And they started getting ideas together, and the other young lady had to drop out of it. My daughter went through and started getting us together and contacted a family who, with a young daughter, at the time I believe was 2, who was getting ready for surgery, and she put her program into effect. Sent out a questionnaire to see what they needed, and found funding to get the things that she needed, and thought about how to best do it. And it took off. It hasn't grown up huge, but it has made a difference in the lives of multiple kids.
Mm-hmm. And what did she put in her backpacks? Do you know?
She does different things that the kids it'll entertain the kids.
Mm-hmm.
She varies based upon their age, and what they're going through. Because, as you know, after many of these surgeries, you may have limited mobility.
Yeah.
So she tries to vary it based on that, which also ties into the age a lot. So it could be everything from stuffed animals and coloring books to different small games.
That's still so great.
She always does something to help keep them focused and give them little bits of joy. One of her keys, I hope I'm not giving away an industry secret, is she tries to do something where they can celebrate their accomplishments. Something where you can, at one point I did a big jar for her at New Year's and said, every day when you have a good thought, write it down and put it in the jar, so at the end you can see those build up. Mm-hmm. She's very big on celebrating the small moments, because it's those small moments that help you see your progress.
That's so interesting, because that was one of the things that I think aortichope talks about too, is when you're having recovery. So it doesn't matter, Marfan, no diagnosis, when you're having your recovery, you can't look at it in terms of days. You'll see nothing. You'll see no marked improvement. But if I've always looked at how can we capture finding it in weeks other than journaling. And so that's so interesting that she's found a way to help people acknowledge the milestones and the forward progress, because that's very difficult.
And it's picking up not just the major milestones, but the little ones. Right. The little ones, and understanding that, and this is for all of us, that recovery is not linear. Mm-hmm. You don't go from point A to point Z. Actually, as I look at this, I'm backwards on the camera. You don't go from point A to point Z.
Right.
You usually go from A to B to, well, back to A, and then maybe to C, and then back to A. There's a lot of back, but you got to celebrate those steps forward. Yeah,
it's like the tides. They're going to come in and they're going to go out, and sometimes they're coming in really in, and sometimes they're staying far out. Yep. And you do, and that's why we often say doing nothing should be celebrated, because that's still doing something. And we also say, forget the glass being half full or being half empty, because it's always refillable. So in a way, you look at each day as it's just today, there's tomorrow, and yet we don't want people to focus on, did I, I'm not recovering. It's been 2 days and I'm still in the same place. In 5 more days, you'll look back and you realize you don't feel like you did 7 days ago. So that's she's just so insightful to figure this out at such a young age,
In my mind, a big part of recovery, and this is something that she has again, kind of like I grew up with my mother. She grew up in the unique position of watching me have multiple aortic surgeries and multiple other surgeries that are related to them. I mean, I've done, so I had my dissection, my first dissection. They did not operate right away.
Where was it?
It was AAA. So it was
Okay.
from my diaphragm to my renal artery and into my kidney. They don't know why it works, but it does. Every time doctors like, the thing is not getting enough blood to still work, but it does, so we're not going to bother it.
Right, doing its thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had my first one. They made the decision that at the time I was too unstable for them to do anything. So they floored my blood pressure, let the scar tissue heal over it. That scar butter was sturdier than the natural aorta. So we're going to leave it. We're going to watch it for a while. And every 6 months I was doing the CAT scans until one day I went to the doctor and they did my echo. I was also doing echoes, and I got to work and cardiologist called me up and said, "Hey, we've been talking about this for a couple of years. We knew at some point you're going to have to see a surgeon." Okay, great. When should I go? Do you have a name, a doctor? He goes, "Oh yeah, you have an appointment at 2:00.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's probably the scariest phone call of my life.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's very, very sobering. But along the same lines, what do you do? Okay. What do I gotta get done between now and till? And they were clear of, this is not an emergency situation, but if we don't get taken care of really quick, it's gonna be an emergency situation, and that's gonna be a lot worse.
So related to that, now that you know you have, and what is the chances of passing this gene down to a child, first of all?
50-50.
Okay. So you've passed it down to one of your children.
Yep.
She has it. One of three. Okay. So now she obviously is monitored closely. Is there anything that's that different from someone who has a known disorder or known mutation versus somebody who isn't? So I didn't find anything, but my son is still going to be treated as if, because we just are assuming now that there's some kind of connective tissue.
So there's not really. No.
Okay, that's good.
There's some, you need to make the decision as a parent to what sort of boundaries do you put in place. So for instance, she was very big in cheerleading as a little kid. We knew it was not something that she could continue to do into high school, and more of a competitive nature. She did the little pee-wee football sideline cheer. Yeah. And did some of the competitions with that, but the coaches were very understanding, because you have to be your own advocate. And many people see it as a bad connotation because, oh, it means you're going to go in there and be mean. No, it's just you're honest, you're open, which I think is a key of, hey, we're open. These are the limitations we have. We would like to work with you, but here's a box that I have to stay in. And you're doing much like we do with aortichope. You're educating people, and they appreciate that. Yeah. They want to work with you. Those things. They find it interesting. So we made the decision to allow her to do the cheer up until high school, and then find other outlets of how she could still be involved in the community and in sports and other things that she loves. You get good at planning and just watching out for little things. And it's the same things that we watch out for, but it's more of if there is a back pain, you watch it a little closer because you have the knowledge that we have of, and depending on what kind of back pain it is it radiating? Check your blood pressure. Check the blood pressure in both arms. One's not good enough. And again, it's when you go to a doctor or medical professional, you're educating them and you're advocating with them.
Right.
For your care and your child's care. But other than that, it really, I don't see it as being that different.
It's so interesting, you know, and as you're talking, it just hit me. There's a lot of people, so a lot of different buckets in one community, one neighborhood, many subdivisions. I like that visual. So we have people in our community with a disorder, with an unknown, had a dissection. Then you've got people watch and wait with an aneurysm, with a known disorder, without a known disorder. And then I just think to myself, well, people with a disorder, aren't they always on a watch and wait? Because as you said, things just spontaneously, I just stand up, made a PBJ, blew out my retina. So, you know, things just can happen. And I guess your mindset is probably very unique. And yet I wonder if it is very common because you live with this. You know, I'm trying to relate and feel it because I'm in a panic sometimes on a watch and wait. And yet I guess I'm living the same way you are too, because I just don't know the name of my connective tissue disorder yet. Right. So, and I think of it having Crohn's and colitis. You know, I have Crohn's disease and never going to get rid of it. There's no cure. I've had it since I was a child, undiagnosed. And I don't even think twice about it. You just know when you have a flare, the things and the tools, and when it's time to go to the ER. So it's just, I guess I'm finding this to be very enlightening. And we've never really sat and talked about this, which is crazy because I know I've known you for like 7 years. I'm just so exciting. But I think if more people that don't have a known disorder adapt the true mindset, which is you probably do, it's just called nameless, and just learn to realize that the more you stress about the potential, the worse it's for you anyway. Exactly. And just kind of live in your limitations and revel in the things you don't have your restrictions, just like any life. Just make the most of everything you can do and not focus on what you can't do as well as you could have or you should.
I mean, I know you're a big fan of musical. I know you're a big fan of Broadway.
Musicals. Yes. Yeah.
And movies, it really is a appropriate title, Tick, Tick, Boom.
Yeah.
About Larson, who the day of his, day before Rent debuted, died of an aortic aneurysm from Marfan syndrome. And it's, if you haven't seen the movie yet, do. Thank me.
And the other so obviously it is of the belief, if not proven, that President Lincoln had Marfan.
It's very back and forth. A lot of people think he did. A lot of people think they didn't. They say that they've done some genetic testing, but it's one of those things where, in my mind, again, the medicine has come so far and the testing has that I think they're still learning things. In my mind, there's no doubt that he had some sort of connective tissue disorder, but they just haven't been able to nail it down.
But one of the things we've learned is to not think that it's only someone that is tall, lanky, all these descriptions, because there are plenty of people that are shorter stature, broader, that also have Marfan. So for one of the things I know Think Aorta and many organizations try to impress upon doctors is just don't even go there. Just stop and think aorta, period. It shouldn't matter that someone's coming in with the Wonka golden ticket saying I have Marfan. This is something that seems out of the ordinary. Let's go to what isn't necessarily in the past obvious and should be.
When you have those physical markers of Marfan syndrome and you have that diagnosis, it is a bit of a golden ticket because it gets some interest. But yeah, 100%. And I talk to people. My daughter makes fun of me because every time somebody famous dies, the places I go are Was it death by suicide?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a drug overdose?
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't one of those, do they have an aneurysm?
Right.
It's
Dissection.
like, why are you so
What was it?
excited about that? Like,
Yeah.
if they're already dead, I want people to raise awareness about it.
Right.
Like,
right.
I wish they weren't. I wish
Yeah.
Flo wasn't dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was wonderful.
Right.
But not to sound insensitive, more good has come from her death for John Ritter's,
Mm-hmm. Alan Fix. Yeah.
These are people who unwillingly have become heroes in a community.
Mm-hmm.
Unwillingly, but deservedly. Because
Yes.
what they've done, and this is something that personally I have always strived to do with my Marfan syndrome and with medical issues, hurt me, take my pain and make it less so for my children
Mm-hmm.
and the people that follow me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to go through this. I know it. I'm prepared for it. I've done it before. That is my purpose in life, is to help people deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means you're going to crack my chest again, I got a couple months of being uncomfortable.
Right.
It's the pain that keeps my kids from having to go through is worth it.
Right. Right.
It's
yeah. I want to check and just see if we have any comments or questions real quick. So we have a question from our community member Terry, who wants to know which child, not having to give names, was it first, second, or third born that has Marfan, and does that play into the 50%?
First, and it does not play in at all. The
just luck.
Just dumb luck, and we've had the other ones tested and checked out, and we've done genetic testing on one of them. We have not on the other, because at this point there's none of, sadly, we just talked about the markers, but as you watch them, the markers do give an indication.
Okay.
And you kind of watch all three of them as if it's okay, yeah, let's go in with a little bit of caution to begin with, because of the family history of aortic issues anyway.
Well, and this is a really interesting thought. And here I would be concerned, just because one of the others does not have the genetic marker for Marfan would not mean that they're not at risk and they shouldn't always be monitored anyway, because somebody in the family has had an aortic dissection. Just like my grandmother dissected her, detached her retinas. I detached my retinas. Nobody knew to think about this stuff back then.
Really?
My father, AAA. I ended up with a thoracic aneurysm. I ended up having the dissection. Nobody pieces it together till the end. So my child, regardless of a genetic component, is going to be followed and going to be monitored. So I would assume then the two that do not have this marker will also just be followed generally as the pediatrician. Yeah. Right.
Well, it's kind of funny too, because it's like I said, it's the oldest that does have it.
Yeah.
And followed the exact same. The one thing is that because it is a genetic mutation, it's very similar. She will never have Marfan's worse than I will.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting.
So it can't get worse, but it could. She could have other issues, or something could affect her more severely. Like I could have a surgery and recover better. But her symptoms and the progression were almost identical to me.
Okay.
As a kid, she would point at things and she'd be like, yeah, look at that over there. And we thought she was just being a silly kid. It was her lenses were so far out of place that she had to give this weird, like, crank her head to look out the lenses and see something in focus that was way over there.
And did you know that there was a 50-50 chance?
Yeah.
I mean, so you knew right away as soon as
Yep.
those symptoms started showing themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was not a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
It's still difficult news, not something you wanted to hear,
Right.
but it was like, okay, great. We know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
I've been dealing with it for 48 years.
Right. Right.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So where are you now? We've done a Where Are They Now? And people can see that on our YouTube channel. They can see, I think, your first interview. There's probably interviews on there from family members as well. And I think the Where Are You Now? But where are you now? Because that was done like a year or two ago. Where are you now? 22.
I'm going to knock on wood as I say this. I think one of the longest periods I've had without having some sort of major medical surgery.
Isn't that crazy? We sit here in my home, it's we're almost at the 1 year mark without an ER visit, and then boom, something happens. I'm like, we have to start counting over again. Didn't make it a year.
I mean, we did. I started giving a rundown earlier. I had my dissection, and then they did the surgery later. While I was in recovery for that, I detached a retina. Because there's nothing like being blind and moving slow. I then had my valve replaced, my valve and root replaced. Then I had a hernia surgery. This is one of the really fun things that nobody tells you about Marfan syndrome is all that connective tissue that's in your belly. If you're lifting things, and I worked in some place where I was lifting a lot of heavy things like kegs, it's really easy to get a big hernia.
Yeah.
So I ended up having a very run-of-the-mill laparoscopic hernia surgery and a lap chole. They took out my gallbladder. That ended up through a doctor's error, partially related to I was on blood thinners because of the valve. I bled out and lost over a third of my blood volume to internal bleeding. So they had to open up my belly and did a full abdominal rebuild. 2 years later, that led to endocarditis that had gotten in my system through that summer of 6 surgeries. And it lived in my heart until one morning I woke up with 104 fever, and on the way to the hospital, I told my wife at the time that I was dying. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've felt this before when I've had endocarditis, and I can tell you right now that my system is shutting down. We walked into the emergency room and they agreed.
That's amazing.
The staff, if you've never had to deal with it, try not to. It's not a whole lot of fun. Is a mean little bugger. And it apparently builds a little slimy force field around itself to protect itself from antibiotics and antivirals. That slime filled my heart to the point of the surgeon, as he so artfully described it, cut my heart open like an orange and cleaned out all the gunk.
So endocarditis is basically an infection in your heart, correct?
Infection in the heart, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that then spreads through the bloodstream.
Nasty.
So I did that. Then a summer later, that was one summer. The next summer, I had another another abdominal aneurysm repair from my renal arteries down into my legs. And that, I think it was 3 years until I then had my second dissection, which is in the root.
So far, so good, though.
I'm holding on since then. That was 3 years ago.
I'm knocking. You've had enough.
Yeah.
So before we go,
I got my toaster.
Yeah. Before we go, Just going to check to see if there's any other questions. So I think there's a question from Julie: is diastolic dysfunction often seen in Marfan?
It can be because the kidneys are one of the areas that is commonly affected by Marfan syndrome. So, yeah, I've been lucky where it has not, but it is fairly common.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we go, let's share with everybody what your role really is here, because you've been on the board really since we were created. I mean, we started off first as a fun Facebook page with fun quotes. And it was just fun with a bunch of girls hanging out, and then we've just grown into this, incredible post-diagnosis patient advocacy organization where you are director of community relations, specifically our Marfan liaison. So if there's anybody out here that is watching live or on replay and you have questions, or you'd like to connect with Bill, or even connect with Bill to find somebody else to connect with, Bill is your person. And so you can send us an email at info@aortichope.org and just ask the question. We'll be more than happy to connect you with Bill Barnhart here from aortichope.
I will tell you that I've talked to a number of people in the community over the years, and obviously my specialty of experience is Marfan and connective tissue disorders, and both recovery and dealing with surgeries and just the unique pace of life, the questions. The feedback that I've gotten is that, and I'm pretty open, as you can tell, is I don't want to scare anyone with my experiences, but I will be open with them because I'm a great example of how you can overcome them and live a full and absolutely wonderful life. You got to stay positive. And it's funny. I have a couple friends who are now lifelong friends who I met in the hospital, are going through very similar experiences, who had a darker outlook. And we've been able to turn that around and make wonderful community members, not just within our community, but within their own community, of keeping them with us.
Well, I couldn't have summed up who you are any better, except I'll say yes, ditto. I 100% agree. You are a voice of reason, a calming voice. Because I know there's been times that that we've talked, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. If I've been on the edge of the cliff, you just have a way of grabbing your drink like you just did and kind of just sitting back and just let's evaluate this a little bit. So no, you're very honest, and your experiences are your own. And I think anybody in the community, when we can share our experiences, it creates dialogue to bring back to our own physicians to start a conversation. It creates questions in our mind, and that's what we're always hoping to do. We're not replacing any medical advice. Your experience doesn't mean mine goes that way, but it could go worse, it could go better. It doesn't matter everybody's different, but it's good to know the truth. I want someone to tell me that taking out a chest tube hurts like hell. I don't want somebody to tell me, oh, it's no big deal, you won't even feel it. I'd rather be prepared for the worst.
We had one of my surgeons has frequently, and he asked me beforehand if he can give my number to people to have questions, and I'm more than open to.
Mm-hmm.
A wonderful track record, and I have talked to patients who have had difficulties, including fatal difficulties, on the table afterwards. But they know going in with a calmer mind of what they're preparing for. Right. 99% of the people I've spoken to call me back later and go, oh my God, you helped so much. Thank you. The chest tube is a funny little story. I'm in the ER or the ICU working with a nurse, nursing students, because again, it all goes back to education. And they said, well, we're here to take out the drainage tubes. The lead nurse walks them through it, says, well, what do you do? And they go, oh, we're going to do this and this and this. And they go, great. They get ready to do it. They go to pull again. And you just killed Mr. Barnhart because you forgot to cut that string. And the poor nursing student almost died herself because she was absolutely beside herself. And I said, that's all right. It happens. You didn't do it. It's all fixable. You didn't make any mistakes. You're learning.
Right.
All week she came back in. Like, how do you do that? What? She goes, I literally almost killed you. And you laughed it off. My role is to help you with this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're that scared about it, you learned a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to scare you out of this profession because you're really good at this.
You are much better than me. Let me tell you. Guy came in. He went to take mine out. I said, how bad's it going to hurt? He goes, well, it's not going to tickle, but we'll do it on the count of 3. I said, like on 3 or after 3? He goes, on 3. 1, 2, ripped it out. And oh, did I let out a what do you say? Explicit. How do you say the word? I can't say the word.
Explicative.
Thank you. I let out the F word really, really, really loud. And yeah, that hurt. But then I laughed because it hurt so bad for like a millisecond, but I'll never forget how bad it hurt. So that's part of the process. And then you're like, it's amazing. Like once all those things come out, you just feel like you wake up. You just woke up.
Pain goes away and you focus on the endorphin rush afterwards, on the joy of, I passed that step.
Yep. That step is now done. And I won't need that again. Not anytime soon. Well, let me double check real quick before we go if there's any other questions or comments. So Julie has a follow-up question. Are most people, and I'm assuming with Marfan, on beta blockers or even added in losartan before, even before dissection? And just from a non-Marfan, once someone finds an aneurysm, they're going to put you on a beta blocker.
Yeah.
Some people know, and losartan, I don't know, not necessarily. I mean, from what I understand, and I'm not a doctor, and sometimes I don't remember everything that's shared on the live events, losartan helps with the elasticity of your aorta and vessels. But so I don't know. I think everybody's different, but it's whatever's going to work for your situation to help keep your heart rate and your blood pressure low, whatever range is right for you.
That's exactly my experience too, is that it's working with other people in the Marfan community and connective tissue community, as most people are on definitely a beta blocker.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more common. You do see some ACE inhibitors, such as losartan, are actually one of the ones that's shown a lot of progress over the last couple of years is irbesartan. It's a close relative. You see a lot of things that are avoided. The one that always stands out in my mind is Cipro.
Oh, yes. Avoid the Cipro.
Cipro, the wonder drug of the early 2000 anthrax scares, is probably caused more damage than anthrax would have.
Is Levaquin another one in
I think so.
World?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think so.
And I have to wonder about prednisone or other steroids. What about prednisone? Because as good of a drug as prednisone can be, and it make you feel like you're super powerful because you feel no aches and pains in your body, it will increase your heart rate substantially. So I'm wondering.
I'm not sure. The floxins like Cipro, they actually weaken the tissue.
Right, and they affect you if you're going to have more, like they cause more like Achilles ruptures and stuff like that, tendon ruptures.
Yeah, they're weakening connective tissue.
Right.
Which is why. And that's one of the other fun things you find with Marfan syndrome. For all the fun Marfan tricks is you want more pulled muscles, pop tendons, duroastasia. Your dura is the sleeve within your spine that holds all the fluid in place. Well, fluid has weight, and that weight pushes down towards the base of your spine, and that dura will expand and sometimes even get to the point where it eats away at the bones in the
Oh,
base of your spine.
fun times.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do we have any other questions or follow-ups? Let's check. We are clear. We have cleared it. 8:05, Bill. This was such a great learning experience. I mean, this really should happen not just because it's Marfan Awareness Month. I think it's such a great bit of information and education and awareness. And I'm so glad that you had the time to be able to share just everything with the community and be so open. And I know everybody will greatly appreciate it. And I know I do, for sure.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. And I'm sure we'll talk tomorrow.
Yep.
Thanks again, Bill. And everybody that's watching, please, even after the fact, leave a comment. Please share this video. It's again, so informational, and it does help to create a lot of awareness. And hit like and hit the bells and all these other things that are on our YouTube page. Aren't I a great influencer? Bing, 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 all my bing, 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 bing. All right, everybody, thank you again. Thanks for joining us. And tomorrow night is bingo. BINGO. Oh, we just got a slip in. That's a lot of information that was just given to me that I couldn't write very fast, that I can't really describe all of it to everybody on here. But to wrap up what I think was just shared with us, it sounds like a lot of time went by in maybe Julie's appointments with some possible questioning of why so much time went by. Is that what you got to there, Bill?
I know that generally the idea is that you want to be checked, obviously work with your doctors, but annual checkups for the aorta, where I believe Julie's were spread out a little further than that with a low dose of losartan. I'm not sure if she had a beta blocker as well or not. But then she also ran into, like I mentioned earlier, one of the dangers of Marfan syndrome of I was literally in a CAT scan and got a clean bill of health, and just a mere hours later had a dissection. And that's one of the dangers that we run into is we can do everything we can to medically manage these, but there's always that there's always a whole card there that we can't see.
It's
we
the human
know what's in
human
store.
element, right?
Yeah, we don't know what's in store, and we can't necessarily prepare for it.
Right.
But the key is to once you go through it, use that knowledge and use what you learned to help move forward and not get stuck with what if.
Right.
Rather get stuck with, this is my story of victory and hope. And Julie, it sounds like I said, I would question the timeline that the doctors were looking at of saying wait 2 years for an appointment. But more importantly, you made it through this. And that means there's something more for you to continue with.
Bill, I do want to ask you real quick. Now, Julie's comment just had me think. I know often doctors will share in our conversations that if you're able to find an aortic disease center that is all encompassing, that would be your first point. You'd want to look for that if you can, because it doesn't exist everywhere, or it's not necessarily around the corner. Right. So does it kind of ring true with, let's say, your cardiologist? Because the first cardiologist I met after my dissection, you could just tell I was just a little bit much. This was a lot more than just your run of your mill. Well, I've got a little heart murmur and maybe need a little bit of a bypass. This was big. So I was sent to a cardiogeneticist who specializes in congenital heart defects and situations also like mine. So is it something that you want to make sure you find somebody who's well versed in Marfan, or can just any cardiologist do this?
No, what you want to do is find someone who, if you can, and I know that not everybody can, you do want to find someone who has some experience. If you can't, and that's fine, because most, like I said, I've been blessed with where I am and having the resources. You want to find someone with a willingness to learn and be involved in your care. I have walked out of many doctors' offices and done it politely. When you walk in and they say, "Oh, this is so cool. I've never had a patient with Marfan syndrome." And you almost see them light up with the idea of, this is how I'm going to make it big. And then I've had other doctors where I've sat down with and they go, "Oh my God, this is so cool. I've never had a patient with Marfan syndrome. I can't wait to learn about this." And those are the ones who it's great. Where can we start? What can I answer for you?
Yeah.
I've been in the emergency room, and for a long time I had a mechanical valve. It was actually pretty cool. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they tick nonstop. And when you're talking to a nurse and they say, "What's that ticking sound?" my answer was always, "If it stops, you screwed up. Undo whatever you just did."
Right.
I'm like, huh? And by the end of the visit, they're sending in students or interns to say, "You have a really unique story, and I think these kids can learn. Do you mind if they ask you some questions?" And I encourage it. It doesn't matter how bad a shape I'm in, as long as I'm lucid.
Sure.
Drug me up so I can converse and not be in horrible pain. And I want to help these people. And it's the same way with the doctor. You work with them to find out. They will work with you to learn what they need to. So I'm always reminded of when I wear my aortichope shirts out, and one particular moment stands out where I was traveling. I was going to the airport wearing my shirt, and we're on the little tram at the airport, and someone stopped me and said, "What is it? What's that all about?" And I gave him my little spiel, and he handed me his business card, and he was a cardiac surgeon. I said, "Great, give me some information." It was like, that's fantastic. I want to learn.
That's what it's about. So I kind of feel like if you have a doctor who either isn't well versed or doesn't really have a lot of patients, not patients.
A lot of patients who have a connective tissue disorder.
Thank you. I was struggling. Emotion, noun, whatever, adjective, noun.
Well, let me say right away, if you have a doctor who doesn't have a lot of patients, my recommendation is that you get a new doctor.
Exactly.
If you have a doctor who doesn't have a lot of patients, spelled the other way,
right,
you still might want to get a new doctor. But if you have a doctor who doesn't have a lot of connective tissue disorder afflicted patients,
thank you.
Don't give up on them.
As long as they want to learn.
Right.
But they got to learn fast, and they have to maybe work in conjunction with your surgeon. So if they have that partnership and they communicate, I mean, kind of like we say, get your scans done at the same facility, same machinery. You want to have your doctors be part of the same medical system because they can 100%. Much more easily communicate. So any other questions or last minute comments? So Julie followed up and had no beta blockers assigned, and she is going to the Marfan clinic, and this is in Canada, I believe. Is that what I heard? Toronto. In April. Well, there you go.
Good luck with
Why no beta blockers? I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
It's good to bring up the conversation. You should talk to your doctor and say, "Hey, I've been listening to some information. I'm just curious to know your choice of medications. I've been hearing beta blockers or the ACE inhibitors? Do you have a thought why yes and why no? And it's good to educate yourself. It doesn't mean that your doctor is not making the right decision for you.
Right.
It just might mean they haven't communicated to you why. And so you should know it's your body.
Self-advocacy is the greatest thing.
Self-advocacy.
Your doctors will a polite, inquisitive self-advocacy will get you so far with a doctor.
Yes.
I mean, not to be harsh, but we are the customer. So you don't have to be polite, but damn it, you should be. Just because that's what you do.
Right.
You want to represent yourself well.
Yep. All right, Bill. On that note, I want to thank everybody for your participation tonight and asking the questions and communicating with us. And if you have anything you want to follow up with, again, you can leave it here on our YouTube channel underneath of this link of this video. You can also do follow-up emails to Bill directly at info@aortichope.org. And Bill, I say sayonara.
Thank you very much.
Adios. Shalom.
Good luck, Julie.
Yes, good luck, Julie. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.